Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. Recently, four South Asian neighbors, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal and India, signed a landmark motor vehicles agreement which would allow for much greater movement of goods and people across each other's border and would in the long run impact much more positively on trade between the four countries.
In June this year, four SAARC countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal and India, signed a landmark motor vehicle agreement, giving birth to the sub-regional framework BBIN to enhance connectivity amongst themselves. The push for this initiative has come from Bangladesh, which had initiated the idea of SAARC in 1985. Dhaka is now keen on connectivity and trade with landlocked Bhutan and Nepal via the slim Indian land corridor around Siliguri, called the Chicken's Neck. And Delhi is willing to go along since India too stands to gain from road, rail and port access to its northeast through Bangladesh, following the agreement between the two countries after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent visit to Dhaka. Moreover, the untapped hydropower potential of Bhutan and Nepal could help Bangladesh and India, two energy-starved countries, to meet much of their energy requirements. Bhutan currently generates only 5% of the estimated potential of 30,000 megawatts, while Nepal has exploited about 16% of its estimated potential of 42,000 megawatts. While optimists see a potential thaw in Indo-Pak relations, as Prime Minister Modi and Modi-Sharif met on the sidelines of the SCO summit in Russia, the pragmatic feel nothing will change after a short, unstructured meeting like this one. For too long, SAARC has been held hostage by Pakistan's insistence that any economic integration initiative with India must be preceded by the settlement of its bilateral dispute regarding the Kashmir issue. This has left South Asia as the least integrated region in the world. And though Indian companies have invested billions abroad, less than 1% of their investments have flown into the SAARC region. About 5% of the region's global trade takes place among SAARC member countries, and less than 10% of the region's commerce is conducted in the SAARC free trade area. But now, with New Delhi serious about its Look East policy, and India's eastern neighbours no longer willing to be held hostage to Pakistan's obstinacy, a new arrangement for trade and cooperation has emerged. And their message is clear. SAARC is now willing to turn the corner without Pakistan.
This agreement between the four South Asian countries, better known as BBIN now, could be the start of a new chapter in SAARC's history. And many say that this could be the region's East South Asia moment. We have with us two distinguished guests who've both been India's envoys to SAARC countries. Mr. Rakesh Sood, who's been our ambassador to Afghanistan and Nepal, and Mr. Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti, who's been our Deputy High Commissioner and then again High Commissioner in Bangladesh. Mr. Sood, sir, it is said that SAARC has been held hostage for a rather long period of time, in fact for most of its years, because of Pakistan's obstinacy that it would like to resolve bilateral issues with India, i.e. Kashmir, before it can move forward in terms of economic integration. On the other hand, it is also said that the blame, some of the blame at least, lies on New Delhi's doors, because India allowed the whole situation to vacillate and did not take any step of the nature that has now been taken. What's your view?
Well, SAARC decisions are taken by consensus, which means every country can exercise a veto, and Pakistan certainly exercised its veto in preventing regional economic integration from moving forward. But however, at that time, we also had difficulties in our relationship with Bangladesh. Today, I think the positive trend in our relationship with Bangladesh is something that has contributed to the fact that we have been able to get the BBIN agreement off the ground.
Mr. Chakravarti, SAARC is quite clearly the world's most least integrated region. And some of the blame, people say, lies even with India. For example, while Indian companies and individuals have invested billions abroad, very little of their investment until now has been in SAARC countries. And even within SAARC, less than 5% of the region's global trade takes place amongst member countries, and less than 10% of the region's commerce is conducted within the SAARC free trade area. What do you think BBIN will achieve us to get beyond what has been achieved up to now? Because it says that this agreement could perhaps enhance growth and trade by 60%.
In the first instance, it will streamline some of the logistical problems that our traders face along the border. It's very simple. A truck comes from the Bangladesh side or the Indian side, they're not allowed to enter each other's territory. So it has to be offloaded and loaded again. That's time consuming and adds a lot of cost to the logistics cost of trade. Secondly, I think when we connect the trains, when the railway lines are connected, the freight capacity is much higher, and we'll be able to carry freight much more at a lesser cost. And then, of course, if the ports, for example, in Khulna and Chittagong come into play, then for Nepal and Bhutan, they have an additional point of entry and exit for their goods, because these two are landlocked countries. So there are plenty of advantages that will accrue once all these agreements are in place, and not just the motor vehicles agreement. That will certainly help. I mean, you can imagine a truck going from New Delhi or Mumbai or somewhere and going right up to Dhaka, so that the trade, the access that the MVA will give, not just to cargo but also to people. Some of the other things that can be done, I think, are in the domain of railways. For example, onboard customs and immigration would facilitate traffic a lot. It will reduce delays at the border points where all these, immigration customs take place. So there are many, many avenues for now even improving on what we have done.
In fact, some say that this agreement has been inspired by what happens in the EU. Mr. Sood, there is another complaint about how trade takes place between Nepal and India, since you were the ambassador there. They say there is a double locking system for ensuring that the cargo that comes from Nepal to India and goes from India to Nepal is checked and ensured that it is actually for usage in the country concerned. Could you explain this a bit further?
Well, what happens is that Nepal is landlocked. So goods coming for Nepal land at an Indian port and then are trucked up into Nepal. Now, there have been cases in the past where these items would find their way back into India. In other words, they would be smuggled into India. The reason is very simple. The reason is that Nepal and India share an open border. And this is a very long, 1700, 1800 kilometer long border. And there is, although technically there should be some amount of monitoring, but neither side has the resources to permit monitoring of goods and people. And so therefore the border is what is termed as an open border. And therefore there have been unscrupulous Nepali traders and businessmen who connive with unscrupulous Indian traders and businessmen. They take advantage of tariff differentials on certain commodities between India and Nepal, import it into Nepal with the express idea of then shipping it out into India. Hence the system of double locking.
Mr. Chakravarti sir, Mr. Modi's visit to Dhaka has clearly energized Indo-Bangla relations. And Bangladesh, being the pioneer of the SAARC initiative in 1985, it is said Bangladesh was also behind this BBIN initiative for its own reasons. One of them was it wanted better connectivity with Nepal and Bhutan, and also in the long run wanted more power from India, which would be provided hopefully once the agreements are all in place by Reliance and the Adani Group. But more specifically about transportation, the point Mr. Sood was making, how does it work between India and Bangladesh, and now this whole dream that India has had for decades of Indian goods going through Bangladesh to India's northeast and avoiding that circuit of 1700 kilometers which they otherwise have to undertake to put anything across to India's faraway northeastern states?
You're absolutely right. Bangladesh has demanded a lot of things from India, knowing fully well that it can leverage this Indian desire for transit, as is to be called. We now call it connectivity, but it's the same thing. That India has been asking for transit through Bangladesh to take people for our people and for goods to travel to the northeast. Otherwise, you have to go through the Chicken's Neck, which is a very, very long route. So how to get Bangladesh agree to these kind of facilitation is basically has been one of the goals of our policy in Bangladesh. Of course, the political situation matters. I think when the opposition was in power, it was a difficult task to convince them, because they kept on saying that, you know, they made excuses basically for not doing anything. Because this whole issue of integration, now at the 18th Kathmandu SAARC summit, there is a specific statement in the joint statement that was put out that South Asia will proceed towards the South Asian Union. I mean, it is as clearly mentioned as that. Now, you can't have a union without integrating some of your basic connectivities by road, by air, and by railways. Now, I think that process is now on, and since Pakistan has opted out, so to speak, so I think the other SAARC countries, particularly in the east, and for us this has another importance. I think we have a look east, act east policy. Now, we also have connectivity issues with Myanmar and Thailand. The trilateral highway is there. So ultimately, taken together, I think this BBIN and BIMSTEC can be the next, the energizers of this India's look east policy, and to increase trade, people to people contact, and generally bring about more growth and prosperity.
We are discussing the BBIN arrangement between the 4 SAARC countries, including India, and the benefits that each country could have from this initiative, and we continue to have our 2 distinguished panelists with us. Mr. Chakravarti sir, it is said that Bangladesh was very keen to push this initiative primarily because it wanted to reach out to the other 2 landlocked neighbors, which is Nepal and Bhutan, via the Chicken's Neck, which you just mentioned. But these countries equally see great benefit in it. I mean, if Bhutan could actually export all the energy that it can produce through hydropower, currently I'm told its potential is expected to be around 30,000 megawatts, and it only produces something close to about 1,500 megawatt or exports that amount. And Nepal much lesser, but there are rivers, and Nepal could expand its energy output by at least 70 to 80%, if 7 to 8 times of what it is doing right now. So where is the benefit really to India in allowing these countries to enhance their power production? Is it all going to be focused towards Bangladesh, or are we also going to get a benefit out of it?
I think there is no doubt about it that all the 4 countries now realize that the energy will be the next new domain where a lot of activity will take place. Something has already happened with Bangladesh. We have connected our grids. We are providing power from the west, from our eastern side and their western side, and we are also going to connect from Tripura for some more power. Now, power is desperately needed in all the countries. Now, Bhutan, for example, Bangladesh has been asking Bhutan for power for quite some time. But then Bhutan has always said that, we cannot do it directly with you, you have to involve India. And that is how finally, when Sheikh Hasina became Prime Minister in 2009, she actually started this initiative of how to get power from India, and that's how the process started. Now, what will happen is the pipeline you've talked about, certainly we can have pipeline. Bangladesh, for example, imports petroleum products from the Numaligarh refinery in Assam. And we are now talking about actually building a pipeline to some part in the northern part of Bangladesh, from where they can be taken out of in barges and things like that. Now, other oil and gas arrangements can be done with Myanmar, rich in oil. And there's a further domain opening up, which is the maritime domain. Now that the borders are settled in the maritime border, we can have offshore exploration of oil and gas, and that, I think, would be a very exciting area for all these countries. And we can do it BBIN or BIMSTEC, or I think BBIN and BIMSTEC would be the 2 major organizations. But in the Bay of Bengal, I would recommend, since both Myanmar and Thailand have coastlines in the Bay of Bengal, I think they can also be involved. And the maritime boundaries are now fully settled, and I think this is going to be a new domain. I think energy is certainly going to be a very, 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 very exciting frontier for these countries.
Mr. Sood, it is said that the benefits to India right now would really come not so much as direct resources that would come into India, but actually to be able to energize this whole group and move quickly forward with our Look East policy, which has got a shot in the arm with the new government, and considering the dead end that we face diplomatically towards our western neighborhood with Pakistan, and with no ill intended towards Afghanistan, but the turmoil that is there, and looking beyond that, the global regime which is continuing to still look at Iran with some concern. So all our opportunities would probably come diplomatically in the East. To what extent would this initiative set the grounds for a much bigger template for India's engagement right across up to Hanoi, where we have, as you would know, built that highway which is going to link all our eastern parts right up to Southeast Asia's right very edge on the Pacific?
Well, first of all, India is a continental power. And I think as we started out right at the beginning, we saw that SAARC was held hostage because of the India-Pakistan differences and Pakistan wanting to exploit that situation. There are three essential advantages, to my mind, out of the BBIN agreement. First, it enables India to unlock SAARC and give an impetus to sub-regional cooperation and to say, look, there is no inconsistency between regional cooperation and sub-regional cooperation. That's point one. Second point for us is the great advantage is that it enables us to push for better connectivity to our own northeast. The third advantage is that it enables us to move forward into Southeast Asia, Myanmar and beyond. Myanmar, Thailand and beyond. Now, for Bangladesh, it has the additional advantage. It integrates Bangladesh with two landlocked economies of SAARC much more closely, Bhutan and Nepal. For the two landlocked economies of Nepal, and for the two landlocked economies, namely Nepal and Bhutan, it enables them to move away from dependency only on Indian ports and have greater integration with the Bangladeshi ports as well. Now, if railways, roads, power lines and oil and gas pipelines, these can develop, then that region certainly becomes a catalyst for the economic development of that region.
A lot of important points have come out by two very seasoned diplomats on the subject of BBIN and the future of SAARC. And SAARC, as we know, which was until now held hostage by Pakistan's desire to move India to accommodate Pakistan's agenda on Kashmir, India, along with three of its important neighbors in the East, has now decided to move the BBIN initiative, which could have immediately three benefits for the region as a whole. One is that it could actually allow SAARC to unlock its potential. It could enable much better connectivity for India to India's northeastern states via Bangladesh in particular, and it would give a much bigger shot in the arm to India's Look East policy, going as far ahead as Myanmar, Thailand, and then on to other Southeast Asian countries. But equally important is a fact that BBIN requires much better roads and rail connectivity, the entire infrastructure to ensure that this arrangement goes through seamlessly is a big challenge, not just for India but for all the governments. And equally important is that it is not just the movement of people and the goods and the trade that will come out of it, but in the long run this could set the template for more energy provision, not just to India but to all the four countries that are signatories of the BBIN arrangement, which is a very important factor in the economic growth agenda of any country in today's world. And apart from BBIN, there are other models and other sub-regional arrangements which India has already been looking at, and the BBIN can again overlap into these, such as the BIMSTEC and the BCIM, which also allows India to spread the benefits of the sub-regional framework beyond SAARC into India's eastern neighborhoods. And finally, there is the challenge of the devil being in the detail and implementing the detail, not just by leaving it to the individual ministry to get it done, but the hand of the PMO and coordination between all the ministries to look at a reasonable time frame to get this effectively in place and to keep it rolling and running to finally let SAARC come into its own, what it was intended to do almost 4 decades ago. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us on this show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.